So hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a continuation of our Career Activist series here. We've got Karen here today. Just a reminder about these videos, it's to highlight the work carers often do. The very few I'd like to add in order to reach other carers regarding the work. It could be care empowerment, connecting with carers' rights, the peer access regarding carers, making carers aware of identification, or just connecting with people really. So what I'll do is I'm going to ask Karen some questions, and she's going to tell you all about the brilliant work she does. I know she's smiling. I'm teasing her a bit, but welcome, Karen. So great for you to come along today. What I want to do actually is I want you to tell us a bit about yourself. Why should carers really be interested in what you do? But a bit about yourself, really, is what we want to hear.
Thanks, Matthew, and thanks for the invitation to have a conversation with yourself. No, it's always good to be able to get that message out around carers because I do feel we're overlooked. So yeah, I'm Karen Machin, and I'm based in the northwest of England. I've had a caring role for many years, over 30 years. I've cared for or cared about or supported various family and friends around, specifically around their mental health, also about physical health problems as well, but certainly around mental health challenges. And that's impacted on my own mental health. So I've ended up using services myself as well. And it's been a long while, adding it up to 30 years. Oh, how time flies. And through using services myself and for caring for people who did, I got involved in various activities, supporting services to think how they could improve. So as that sort of involvement role, I got involved in all sorts of different things over the years, both locally and regionally and nationally, and doing different bits and pieces of work. I guess specifically around carers, I've been involved in a lot of research. So I did some research around and supported a team around research around carers who support people who are using secure care services,
Yeah,
both in Scotland, and then we did a later piece of work in England. So we did that. I currently do a lot of work with the Policy Research Unit. So I'm on their Lived Experience Working Group. And we had a paper out, we did some work around the Mental Health Act when that was being reviewed a few
yeah,
years
that's
ago.
right. Yeah.
So there was a piece of work around carers' experiences around detention.
Mm. I'm going to
And
move
I'm
on
also,
to.
sorry.
Sorry, I've cut you off there because
No,
you. I wouldn't be able to ask any other questions because you've literally gone through all of them before I've gotten to the next one. But that just shows how much, you know, you've done, and that's why I've invited you, because you're very high profile in the work that you do, specifically when it comes to mental health lived experience, mental health carers. So one of the core points for this question is, what sort of things do you think is important for mental health carers? What sort of support do you feel you perhaps provide or try to raise awareness of for mental health carers, that being those who care for someone, with mental ill health, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think for me, I do think that carers are really overlooked. I know it took me ages to work out myself that I was a mental health carer, if you want to label it like that. It took me a long time to work that out. I think because the messages around carers tend to be about that physical support or that personal care. Mental health carers do tend to get overlooked and take ages to be identified or identify themselves. So I think that support to identify carers is so important.
Mm,
So I think that's why a lot of the work I do is around research and just making sure that carers get included in that, because I think if you don't know about carers, as a researcher, I've seen researchers asking carers about what support they need, and carers will answer that it's support for the person that they're supporting. They won't think about their own well-being and their own support that they need. It's always about, if the person I support has got the support, then I'll feel a lot better. Well, let's look at what support carers need themselves. I think to me is really important. And that's kind of brings me on to the work I do around peer support, and how do we as carers support each other? Because over the years, that's where I've got my support from, because peer support is around other carers who just sort of get it. They understand the problems, don't need to go back to the beginning and explain it all. I think that peer support from carers has been quite essential for me.
Excellent. Just so we sort of make it just a bit clearer, because from my experience, peer support is certainly necessary. It's one of the most important things. Um, when you're caring for someone, it's easy to be isolated, misunderstood, and be behind the scenes, as to state that, well, you're not the one suffering, so therefore, why do you need any support? That's understandable. If you can explain just a bit more on the importance of care peer support. Why should carers care to look out for each other? Why is that important to yourself? Just so in case other carers or professionals don't even know about what that means.
I think for me, it's just about carers have been there and got that experience and understand what you're going through. So all the conversations that you have with mental health services, for example, are about the person that you're supporting. Everything about them, about some other person that you care deeply about, and you absolutely want the best for them and want their best support. Absolutely get that. But where is the support for the person who's being a carer? And I found that in carers groups, being with people who just got it, we'd kind of see the bits that were being missed. So somebody might be eligible for a particular piece of support, or might benefit from seeing a specific service somewhere else. And as carers, we'd spot that in a way that other services wouldn't, because they're focusing on the person who's being supported. They're not focusing on the carer. So I think other carers can really see what you're going through and can see through it as well. Because as carers, we say we're fine, but other carers can spot it a mile off that you're not.
Yeah, that's a very good example. I do run a couple of care peer support groups myself. I do them online, and I do hear often when I say to a carer how things been for you, straight away they talk about the person that they're caring for, and I have to try and gently repeat the question, but what about yourself? Don't get me wrong, there are groups. Well, I do hope there are groups, from Mind and Rethink and Sane, Mental Health Foundation have support groups for those who've lived experience. It's important we have support groups, care network groups, care peer groups, friends and families and carers who often just sort of cope and get on with it. Yeah, it's true that they're not really under the amounts of pressure and illness as they're cared for, but that doesn't mean that it's the perfect scenario for them, for the friends, families, and carers. You mentioned that you do a lot of projects, and I can see the interesting bit regarding research, because at the end of the day, you do need proof and data to sort of clarify what that project is about. That's really important. What are the challenges in your role as a care activist in order to develop more focus and awareness on the care peer support, the care network? What would you say the challenges are?
I mean, I think that fundamental lack of awareness of an understanding of carers, that really does underpin everything, doesn't it? That people just don't understand what the role of a mental health carer is. We didn't, I don't know, I remember when I first started, I didn't get it myself. I think, oh, I'm not doing much, I might be awake all night, it might be, there all hours of the day being worried, but that's not as difficult as having to provide that sort of physical, personal care for somebody. And I think underneath a lot of that as well is that stigma and discrimination that is related to mental health. But I think there's an additional stigma and discrimination related to carers, which kind of sometimes blames the family. I mean, historically that has been particularly bad, and hopefully we're moving away from those times. But I think we still silence the family. It can be quite difficult to speak up and talk about our own needs as carers when we know that the person that we're supporting is in far greater need of support from somebody. We might be really struggling ourselves, and that makes it then really hard to get involved in research, really hard to get involved in activism, because we're struggling day to day with supporting somebody who we're really worried about and care for. It makes it harder then to try and change things. So I think there's a lot of stigma and discrimination involved around carers, which ends up silencing us, and then we don't get involved in improving things.
Yeah, that's very important. And one thing that I've realized is I still feel that there's far too few carers getting involved in the mental health services. They are an important voice on how services impact families and friends and those in the community. We can't ignore those voices. Not to say that the service user or patient voice isn't important. It certainly is. But to state the service as a whole, the mental health services or health and social care services, or even policies, coming from the government, from NHS England, it's got to include the friend, family, and carer element, specifically also the young carer and ethnic minority carers as well. Um, Other
And I
thing,
think within all that, I think I would also emphasize that as a carer, we quite often don't realize just how worn out and stressed we are. I
hmm,
know at times, for example, at certain times my caring role has ended. Um, and looking back, it's only when I look back at the time of being a carer that I've realized just how stressful it's been. So it's not surprising that carers don't necessarily get involved while they've got an ongoing
yeah.
caring role. It's not surprising. I think that's why I kind of have stuck around in those little periods where I've not been having a caring role.
Mm. I also admit my caring role has been far, far easier. I get a lot of support in my caring role, which is why I do a lot more involvement now and a lot more activism if I can. I mean, that's something that I want to continue doing, and I'm hoping that's something you will continue doing, which leads us on perfectly to our next question. What future projects are you working on aimed at carers?
I read that question, I thought about that question and thought such a tricky one because I think everything I do involves carers. For about 30 years, I remember writing an article once a long, long time ago, and I just called it sort of like dot, 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 and carers, because it's that whole thing of, it's always service users and carers as a sort of like a little afterthought on the end. And I think a key feature of what I do is just remind people, that and carers, we are important. We do need to be included, not necessarily as the centre of things, but just making sure that that view is included. So whatever I do might not be focused specifically on carers or aimed at carers, but it certainly includes them. And I would hope that other activists do the same. I would hope that I can influence a lot of other people as well to start thinking about where's the carer's voice missing, or does that add something different to include carers, or how do we include carers if carers are so stressed out with a day-to-day caring role, especially as services are becoming more and more unable to support people, and we really are relying on carers to do a lot of that work. How do we get a carer's voice involved? So hopefully that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and I can see I do go online and I see the amount of work and promotion of your projects. It's a great read. And in the blog that I'll write later, I hope you don't mind if I link to some of those projects. They're really important and they're certainly most needed. We're going to move into our last final question, or unless something you all raised that wants me to ask anything further. But I think the last question is quite important, really. What advice would you want to offer to carers watching this video now who might not know that they are a carer? You might accidentally fall into the role of supporting someone who might have, self-harm or eating disorder or form of psychosis. What advice would you offer that person starting out as a carer?
I would just keep it really, really simple. So the one bit of advice I would have, if you think you've got a caring role at all, if you think that you're supporting somebody, if you're worried about someone that you live with or a friend, or just someone that maybe you're taking quite a bit of time, just like emotional support, you're spending a lot of time just being there for somebody, I'd say not to forget about yourself. And I think the primary thing I would advise you to do and really encourage someone to do would be to go and speak to other carers. Not being shy to join a carers group. I think joining groups can feel like a huge step, can't it? It's like, oh gosh, go into a room with a bunch of strangers. And although nowadays a lot of them are online, aren't they? I know, Matthew, you run groups online. Um, I just think it's just so worth it. Even if you just go along and sit there, I think you'll be amazed at the support you'd get from other people. And that feeling of actually not being alone, that this isn't a unique situation. You know, we're all encouraged to talk about our mental health nowadays, aren't we? But I think there's an acceptable form of mental health problems that people are allowed to talk about. And then there's the stuff that we think, oh God, it's only happening to me. It's not just happening to you. Do you know what I mean? Just go and join a carers group, go and speak to people who've been there, and you'll feel a lot better for it, I think.
Mm. Wise words indeed. Something I would certainly echo for anyone who ends up having to support someone with specifically mental health condition. You know, and it could be long term as well. One of the main themes regarding the unpaid carer role is isolation. It certainly happened during the pandemic, and it's, you know, to be honest, it still happens in some length. And I think it's maybe due to resource issues. You're right. I'm too lazy to travel, so I tend to run quite a few groups online. But it's not. I suppose you're right. It's not the same as, you know, if you're at a care center or a hospital. To have carers come along, you can feel that you're not the only one in, you know, in the community having to go through it. I'm not saying that all carers will understand. There will be situations, unfortunately. I don't know if you've heard of this. You know, you'll have a carer say, "Well, I'm suffering more than you, and woe is me." And I think that is, yeah, you get that. And they might sort of push people out. They say, "Oh, well, you're not a carer because you're not suffering more than me." And we want to sort of guard against that. The theme is we're just trying to be there for someone close to us who is unfortunately in need or will need our advocacy. It's not always just about being present to care. I think with the mental health system, you might find you have to advocate for that person because unfortunately there might be insight issues. I'm not saying 100% you'll do it, but the way the mental health system is it can be a complex maze. You're not guiding it just for yourself. It's having to share that journey with the person with the mental health need, if you know what I mean. So any final
It is, but
word?
I think like you're saying that there's almost like that. I don't know. In service user groups and peer support groups, we describe it as that top trumps of who's had it worse. You know, it was people compete necessarily, and I don't
It can
necessarily
happen,
see that
yeah.
so much in carers groups. I think I've always been really warmed by the open inclusion in carers groups where
Mm,
people are caring, people are naturally coming from that space of wanting to support somebody else, and that warmth and that openness is then provided for anybody else who joins the group. You know, that if somebody comes in as carers get it, that it's
yeah,
hard to join a group, you know, and that if you're there, it's not because you're there out of curiosity, it's there because you need some support, because we've all been there.
that's really important. And I do hope across the country, carers group welcome those who need that support. I do think the element of peer support, I suppose the idea of it is easy to begin with. We all need to connect and share ideas and find ways to support each other. But in the later stages, it gets more complex. And I do think sometimes, specifically dealing with carers who might, unfortunately, develop anxiety, depression, anger, there might be a little bit of training and a bit of the advice coming from yourself on how, you know, you can alleviate that sort of thing. But I do hope, I really do hope that the peer element, the care peer element for carers grows, because there are millions of carers out there who still feel unconnected to services, unconnected to the community, and
Yeah, I'd like to see it if services support paid for carer peer support
yeah,
workers. So we've got lots of peer support workers, you know, it's a growing thing in services to have peer support workers. So let's have some peer support workers who have got that experience as a carer and who can support other carers. You know, and they might be the kind of people who might then take you to the first support group meeting. Do you know, I mean, they
yeah, of
might,
course.
you know, things like that. I just think, yeah, let's make sure services support carers.
One final thing, this has been such an interesting discussion. I should have closed it ages ago, but it's been such an interesting discussion. So much to learn from this. Can you give me some shining examples from NHS trusts that do work really well regarding developing a care peer support process? You know, whether it be a person is allocated regarding care peer support, they have a policy in place, they have a group mental health care can come to. Is there any mental health trusts that you feel that have Do you want to
You know,
share
I'm not going to
anything?
name anybody at all. I've seen, I do a lot of work around peer support, and I've seen pockets of stuff in
Yeah.
places. Um, and I could say how wonderful they are. But in those same trusts, there would also be pockets of stuff where it's not worked so
Oh,
well.
okay.
So I
Mm.
wouldn't name anybody as being this is the one version, because if you do that, there is a danger that everybody then looks to that one, wants to copy it.
Mm.
But actually, in the same trust, you know, I mean, at the moment, I think peer support is so new that it really comes down to the individual person. And there's some brilliant people around. Um, but if they were to leave, and you know, it would just take them to be replaced by somebody else who didn't quite get it. And you know, it's really risky time at the moment, I think. So yeah, there's lots of great stuff going on. So I'd say just get in there and encourage more of it.
Brilliant. Well, I'd like to say thanks very much, Karen, for helping to educate others out there regarding what is important regarding what you're trying to promote for yourself, for other carers. The care network and the peer element, the lived experience, the groups, and engaging with services on this in order that this sort of form of activism grows. Carers should be connected. And I'd like to thank those watching today. Certainly ask questions in the YouTube channel. What you think the future is for care peer support, or what you think the situation is now. We'd like to hear from others, and we're sure many families and friends and carers out there are providing that kind of support and are being on that journey with the cared for, getting the experience of those services. So I'd like to say we'll see you next time. We'll have another speaker here trying to educate what is so important for carers and why care activism is one of the things that's needed these days. So take care, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.